And we're up to episode 16. Give it a few more seconds here, and then we'll start for everybody that's kind of standing by and waiting. We're here every Monday, by the way, and we are live, according to our sources behind the scenes here. We appreciate you tuning in to this episode of Scale Up Heroes. This is episode 16. Here we are all about bringing you the best minds with the best real-life experiences when it comes to scaling up businesses. Our panelists every week are the heroes that have taken on the difficult odds and are living to tell the tale. I'm your host, Randy Cantrell, coming to you from Dallas, Texas. Our hosts are all over the globe. To our viewers, we want to especially invite you to visit our website, ScaleUpAcademy.io. Today, we're talking about scaling up talent. And so we welcome our viewers. We welcome our guests to the show. I want to introduce today's moderator, Nina Devouge. I knew I would mess it up, Nina. I've practiced it in my head. Okay, say it right so I know it.
It's Nina Devouge.
Devouge. I practiced it, I promise, but I don't speak French, but there's that. So Nina Devouge. Nina is an HR Kickstarter. She is in Singapore. Welcome and thanks for moderating today's panel, Nina.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and clearly, definitely an honor. So thank you, Randall, and thank you, everybody, for being here. I really want to just introduce my panelists. But before that, just to set some context too. It takes 4 things to scale up a company: product, a proven revenue business model, sufficient capital, and a scalable organization. Most scale-up or startup founders actually focus on the first 3, forgetting that they need to build a scalable organization. And as a result, the human part of the organization lacks sometimes this much and sometimes this much behind the business needs of the organization. And when it's time to really scale, all these challenges come at one go. So I'm here with my panelists, my colleagues from the industry, Arzish from Smartkarma, Georgiana from Paddle, Peter from Showpad. Showpad. Sorry about that. And Zaina from Unbabel to really, tell you a little bit more about what's going on in the industry. So Arzish, maybe over to you. If you can start by kicking off with introductions, my fellow comrade from Singapore.
Sure. Thank you, Nina. Pleasure to be here. And I'm really looking forward to participating and contributing to this panel discussion. So my name is Arzish Baaquie. I work for Smartkarma, which is a Singapore headquartered startup. We were founded in Singapore, and that's where headquarters are, back in 2014. It's been 4 years since then. I was employee number 5, I believe, so early employee. We've kind of scaled our headcount from what was 4 or 5 people to now roughly 40 in Singapore. And I was sent to London in September of last year to build out the United Kingdom operations for the firm. So I've scaled, I use the word scale a lot, but I've basically built up the headcount here from just myself to what we have now is 4 full-time employees, 3 part-timers, and myself. So we've effectively built an office in the past 9 months. And I'd love to share my observations on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Zaina, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Nina. Excited to be here. So I'm the People Ops Director at Unbabel. And Unbabel is an AI-powered human refined translation as a service company based in Lisbon, Portugal. We also have some offices in the US, in New York and San Francisco. And we work with companies like Skyscanner and Rovio and King. We have about 130 people at the moment here in Lisbon. And we've doubled in size since I joined a few months ago. So we're on our journey to scaling up.
Wow, well done. Thank you. Peter from Showpad.
Of Showpad, you'll never forget that again. Hi, so I'm Peter. Very glad to be here. I'm the VP HR, VP of People of Showpad. Showpad is a founded in Belgium about 7 years ago. We still have our global HQ there with about 150 people today in Belgium, about 330 globally. I joined about 18 months ago as the first VP HR. And so we've doubled in revenue and in people in those 18 months. Showpad is a software platform. It's the first fully integrated sales enablement platform. So where companies basically build a bridge between sales and marketing, put all their content on our platform, and sales people use all the technology that is out there, from machine learning to artificial intelligence, to retrieve content, to get conversation analytics on it, and also to get digital coaching on when they are using content. And so today we have 6 offices worldwide, 150 in Gent, 25 people in London, about 10 people in Munich, and then we have about 100 people in Chicago, about 50 in San Francisco, and 25 in Portland, Oregon. So that's our geographical footprint. And about 50-50 in terms of revenue between Europe and the US.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Sounds very exciting. I should have had technology when I was a salesperson. All right, Georgina, over to you. Georgiana.
Hi everyone. I'm really happy to be here and be part of this panel. So my name is Georgiana. Everybody calls me Georgina. That's okay. I am lucky enough to manage the talent team here at Paddle. We are a checkout marketing and analytics platform that helps over 800 companies sell software globally. We are based in London. So when I joined 7 months ago, we were around 35. And I came in to help scale up and hire mostly in product and engineering, which are our main pain points as a tech company. We've now scaled up to 90 people, and we are looking to grow to 180 by the end of the year. We are also opening an office in San Francisco this year. So yeah, exciting times for the talent acquisition team here at Paddle.
Very cool. Thank you. Thank you all. Everybody clearly is at slightly different stages. Some are a bit bigger than the others. So let's kind of draw this commonality, right? In terms of the one thing that's underlying this whole conversation. What does it really mean to scale up? Georgiana, now that I've got you on the panel, let's start with you.
Oh, okay. So it's really a complex question, and obviously I am more qualified to talk about it from like a recruitment talent perspective. And scaling up recruitment, it's not just about the pressure of getting as many people through the door as possible. It's also about creating a great candidate experience, putting some processes in place around recruitment, onboarding, creating new teams and even departments. And as you create those departments, deciding if you should build a specific department from the bottom up or the other way around, like bringing in a head of department that can build their own team. It's about constantly learning, stealing best practices from other businesses, looking into diversity. That's really important. I think it should be done early on. I know a lot of businesses that have scaled up and now they're 200 people or over 200 people and realize they don't have any, minorities or women throughout the company, and especially in leadership roles. And it's also about making mistakes, learning from them, and, having lots and lots of fun in the process, hopefully.
Awesome. Anyone else wants to contribute?
Sure. I think for me, the biggest challenge of scaling talent starts with the fact that I think every successful organization is based on a strong culture. And if you scale quickly, it is very hard to maintain that. And to use a personal stat, I've been 18 months at Showpad, and more than half of the people have been there less long than I have. And what it means is we've hired 90 people this year. We've hired 90 in the previous 6 months. So we have about 180 people over the last 12 months. And just spending sufficient time on not just onboarding, but making sure that you pass on your culture and your DNA, I think cannot be stressed enough. And so what we do as Showpad, which is a major investment of both time and money, is we bring the whole company 1 week a year together. So we've brought 250 people 1 week to Florida, and we will do that again next year, probably with 400 people, just because there is no other way in getting everyone on the same page. And this is just one aspect of passing on the culture, but to me, that is a key component and one of the biggest challenges when you scale so quickly.
I think that's a really good point, Peter, actually. And I think recruitment, Georgiana, you're right, is really crucial when you're scaling a business. But I think the culture is also so important. And I think a big part of that is having a really strong senior management team supported by really skilled managers. And that goes a long way to helping develop that culture as well, I find.
I think I think something that Peter said really stood out there. So for us, like I mentioned earlier, we're headquartered in Singapore, but as I'm building the team out here, we make it a point to send every new hire we have to Singapore to spend some time with the team there, because it's crucial that they kind of understand the DNA, the culture that we have in the company at headquarters, where the founders are situated as well. And one of the main reasons why I was sent here to set up the office is because, like you mentioned earlier, to kind of continue to inculcate that same culture, that same DNA into whoever we bring on board in a foreign market. I think it's a very important consideration for any company that's scaling across the seas.
Mm-hmm. Maybe one other aspect that is interesting to highlight there is that I think the way you keep that culture is, first of all, so I think ideally your culture comes from your founders and then they need to exemplify it. But also I think their involvement in hiring is super important. And so at Showpad, the CEO, until we were more than 250 people, were still meeting every single candidate. And even today, he still gets the option to see everyone we bring in. And I think that investment is super important, and you can definitely see that reflected in the people we have. And last but not least, also you need to have the courage to also, when you need to fire if people are not fitting into that culture because they lack some key components. And that's certainly as you grow and you enter more like 200-300 people, that's not always that easy. I mean, Showpad has, for example, be humble as a key value. And when you grow and you bring in very experienced people, some people have lost that along the way. And it takes some courage at times to say, this is not us. We cannot live with that sort of behavior. So.
Thanks, guys. Sorry. Continue, Georgiana.
Georgiana,
sorry.
To add to your point, Peter, there is also, around making sure that everyone that joins the company and comes in understands what the culture is about, and also make sure that the people that are within the company understand what interviewing for culture actually is. And it's mostly about, adhering to the same principles. Like you said, be humble. For us, we have learn constantly and be open and transparent, and some other. But the idea is make sure that when your team is interviewing, they understand that they need to hire people that, match the company culture, rather than adding people that are similar to their personalities and like the same things and like to hang out in the same pubs and talk about the same books and go skiing in the winter.
Thank you, Georgiana, and thanks all. That's really interesting that you meant that everybody is very clearly mentioning culture as one of the biggest, like the backbone of what it takes to scale up the organization. Now, working with a lot of the companies that I've worked with, the key thing that we found is a lot of people don't define the culture until it's too late. And by then, a lot of the bad habits have already been stuck, if you know what I mean by bad habits. So first things first is, when should we start to define the culture? At which stage? At the very beginning, in the middle? Who should be involved in defining the culture? And second thing, one of the other things that we're realizing as well is, how do we make the culture authentic and real, instead of just something that we want to be, it's so ideal to be humble or to get things done, and but it might not be real, it might not be authentic to the organization, right? It could be just ideal. So two questions. One, it's when should we start defining the culture, and two, how do we make it authentic? Zaina.
So I think really all organizations have a culture, even if you don't define it. I think it's useful to try and define it quite early on. And although it's a process that I think HR can help with and facilitate, I think it's something that really has to be led and driven right from the top. So it really needs to have the C-suite involvement and pushing it forward. And I think that's also, in a way, to answer your other part of the question, how you make it authentic. Because if it's something that we're just coming up with a load of buzzwords, like you said, it's really not going to have any impact at all. And sometimes I think it can even be a demotivator for people. So I think getting that level of involvement is really important.
For me, Nina, I think there are two key things to realize about culture. One, and about values, because that's essentially what we're talking about, right? I mean, you're defining values in a culture. It stems from founders in an ideal scenario. But I think two things to realize are, I think on the one hand, the wordings are not so different. So it's not about what the phrases are like. It's about whether people believe them or not. And I think the way to test that is to see what happens if you change them. And I can tell you at Showpad, if you change one of the values, and we've actually gone through a whole exercise around it, the email box, my email box, and the email box of the CEO would explode if we would decide tomorrow that be humble is no longer a value. So I think it's important if people say, well, they all look the same. The answer is yes, they do, but in some organizations, people believe them, in others don't. And then the second piece, which is not my insight, but it's actually it's research that Google did, is they kind of looked at how people feel about culture, and culture degrades at every stage of growth. And at Google, whether they went, and they started this early, whether you go from 50 to 500 or from 500 to 5,000, etc., people are always nostalgic about the culture in their first months. And it's also good to recognize in your organization that culture degrades at every stage, and that you need to kind of update your values as well. And so we did a large exercise, like a bottom-up exercise with the whole company, with the 250 people, about these are our values, and we need to kind of update them and reflect them. And so to give you a very simple example, we had transparency by default as a value at the time when we were a startup, and we were sharing literally everything. And so that became be transparent, which is kind of more like we are transparent whenever it is appropriate. But when you get over 30 million and you have more than 300 people, you actually don't send an email anymore every time someone leaves, just because it's not sustainable. So, but to me, those are two key insights in how culture evolves as you grow.
Okay, thank you. Arzish, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say something. It's funny that I keep speaking right after Peter, but I think one point that you guys have kind of touched on briefly is it's very important for let's say the founders and the early employees have effectively come up with a culture and certain values that they effectively hold dear and they publicize. It's crucial for the founders to then, and the early employees, to really lead by example. And I think, they have to really, continue ascribing and also subscribing to these values and behaving accordingly. Because if, at the very top, you have these values and they're not adhered to by the founders themselves, it's a kind of waterfall effect. So that's something we've seen in other startups and I've heard about, but we try very hard to ensure that even our founders are held responsible and they hold those values close to them and they act accordingly.
Thanks for that. Now, so you talked about the founders a little bit, and I think it's actually leading a good segue into one of the questions that I had. What are some things which are key non-negotiables a CEO or a founder or co-founder needs to know when it comes to scaling up or about scaling talent?
I think one of the most important, sorry, is that a question for me?
Yes, anyone.
I take it anyway. I think one of the most important things that I would give in terms of advice is to not compromise on hiring. I think it's really tempting, and we found this recently as well, to when you're desperate just to get bums on seats and get people in, but you're really doing yourself a disservice when you take people on who aren't up to scratch. It really drags the quality of the whole team down. So I'd say that probably is an issue that a lot of people might face.
Yeah. I really agree to what you said. It shouldn't be about, lowering the standards. It should be about understanding and adapting to the market and making compromises where it makes sense. And they also need to understand that every company, from the likes of Facebook, LinkedIn, to a 5-people startup, they struggle to hire great talent. It's not just we are a small business problem. We are scaling really fast. We need to hire talent. Everybody out there, and not just in London, it's struggling for talent, both in tech and outside of tech. And I would also back to, I guess, something that I said when we discussed about what's important as a company. It's as a company scaling up. I think they should focus on hiring for diversity at the beginning, as in my experience, this is a very difficult problem to solve while you're, 300 mostly white male company with no women or cultural minorities in leadership roles. You can't fix it afterwards. You've kind of sort of created this white male dominated culture without even wanting to. And it's really hard then to kind of start bringing females in key roles or bringing minorities into key roles or into your teams. I guess it's very tempting to, as referrals programs are in place, it's very tempting for colleagues to recommend people that are similar to them. And especially in tech, it happens to be, and here in London, it happens to be like a male-dominated culture. At least from my experience, we have the lowest rate in Europe in females in engineering.
Very, very interesting point there, Georgiana. I see that in London very much. Very male-dominated applicant pool we've seen as well for our firm. A few things I'll add on very quickly. I think the scaling of talent, it's a very challenging affair. On the one hand, you want to add valuable team members. They'll help you achieve your scaling ambitions, and you want to do it quickly. But on the other hand, if they're kind of rushed hires, you risk undermining the progress and your momentum, and actually you could end up setting your firm back instead of bringing it forward. I think Nina, the question you asked was about some of the key things the founders should keep in mind or know about. Some of the things that I've kind of jotted down is hiring people and scaling talent. These things require patience, diligence, and transparency. So what I mean by that is patience during the hiring process. Don't rush it. Spend time. Get other team members to interview the candidate, etc. Diligence on understanding the market you've kind of landed into, and also in the approach to identifying and shortlisting these candidates. And finally, transparency when you're posed with difficult and awkward questions by these candidates. Try and be honest and give an answer that you're happy with, as opposed to skirting the issue. Those are kind of 3 things that I found very useful when hiring candidates or talent while scaling.
Very helpful. Thank you. Completely agree with everything everyone's just said. And one of the things particularly is transparency about, one of the companies I've actually worked with many years ago had a great reputation when it came to culture. And one of the things we had to be was incredibly transparent. We had to tell them the good, the bad, and the incredibly ugly, even made them walk all the way to the toilet and said, come back to us after looking at the toilets if you really want to continue and move ahead in the process. So some of you may know who they are. They've just recently made a sale to one of the biggest companies in China. So, these things can become very successful at the end of the day. I think it's some secret of being transparent, right? Completely agree. Now, Georgiana, you talked twice earlier today about diversity. We all know that obviously hiring the same type of people is a quick race to the bottom, right? So what are some of the challenges surround being able to create an environment that's both diverse and inclusive, and where people can belong, particularly in the industry that we're in, or in the business that we're in, where you're basically pressure, a lot of pressure is about, driving the revenue forward, growing the business. What are some of the challenges, and how can we mitigate it?
So I guess the challenge starts from, getting people through the door to keeping them in the company and make sure that they progress in their career and they're not left somewhere behind and they stay into the role for like 3-5 years and then somebody comes in and steals them away. So I guess it starts from a recruitment perspective. I would say it would be about, doing your due diligence, like removing biases by, language that's biased from job descriptions, from every communication that you have. It can be about looking at, the hiring funnel and seeing what sort of applicants you get and trying to do direct sourcing methods to kind of, okay, we only have like male candidates, mostly they are diverse, but they're just male candidates. So we should try to outreach to female candidates. It's about organizing events. It's about opening the doors to your company to minorities from different groups or different ethnicities. It's about showing them how you work, being as transparent as possible. I guess it's also about making sure that the hiring managers understand what it's like to manage diverse teams. They understand the challenges that the challenge that comes with that, but also the opportunity, because as a lot of studies show recently, diverse teams are the ones that are actually very high performing. And they need to kind of be prepared and understand that everybody comes from different backgrounds and they have their learning curves and they have their kind of a little bit like specific needs. Like, for instance, for me, I am not from the UK. So when I first came in here, it was difficult. Like, communication was a barrier. I did understand English, but I didn't understand, slang or like commonly used language was very difficult for me to understand. And whenever we are talking about something and people were using slang, I would snooze out of a meeting because I didn't understand it. And also sometimes I may come across as direct just because I'm using like a more formal language. So it's about, and it was of great help that my manager understood this and, helped me kind of overcome this and also, helped me feel part of the team as I was the only non-British person of a 20-something HR team when I first came to London. So I don't know, did I answer your question?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you did. You basically said, how to make someone feel included, right? Is to welcome with open arms, right? So a lot of the things I think that we culturally, even as people, right, when we're speaking to each other, people of a certain social economic background, people of a certain education, people of certain, gender, basically we have a certain, I call it the common language denominator. I don't actually know if it's an actual phrase, but it's a common understanding, right? And thanks a lot for that. That's a really, really great example. Zaina, or Peter, do you have any more examples around this, how we could potentially create a more diverse, inclusive environment where people feel like they belong within such a high pressure cooker environment?
Yeah, I think this is a really, really important topic, especially working in technologies as Unbabel in the technology space. But actually, I wanted to touch on something Georgiana said, because I think it's really important to recognize as well, it's not always just conscious or unconscious biases that influences diversity. I think it's also an acceptance that for some roles and in some areas, there's just a much smaller talent pool in certain groups of people. And as a company, I think it's really important that we recognize that we have a responsibility to try and encourage that to grow, whether it's running courses or open days or the events that Georgiana mentioned. I think that's a really important thing for us to do as well, because ultimately we want to make sure we get the best people, and we want to make sure we have a diverse work environment too.
I think from a Showpad perspective, I think diversity of any kind, I think is something that comes very natural to us, just who we are. And I think authenticity is an important part of who we are. At the same time, though, I think it's also important to measure if that sentiment is correct. And so we do engagement surveys, and so one of the statements is in there like, we're checking in on that sentiment, whether people actually do feel comfortable. We make a statement. Showpad creates an environment where anyone of any background feels comfortable, and then actually to get an objective. It's part of the HR dashboard to see how that evolves, and there is a very small group of people who thinks that there is it's not where it should be, but it is important that even though we have 80 nationalities in the office in Belgium, and I think we have all sorts of diversity, I do think it's still important to keep that sentiment objective and to keep checking in as well.
Thank you. Sorry, Arzish.
I'll just add something very quickly. It's a bit of a funny anecdote. Georgiana, you mentioned, and I'll talk a bit more about the gender aspect here. You mentioned language earlier when you were speaking. So we put out a few job advertisements here in London on the various portals, etc. And I realized a vast majority of our applicants were male. I know this is for a business development role, which doesn't have to be, male. It can be female as well, right? So I was very puzzled by this. And it turns out a friend of mine who's a trained psychologist, she looked at the job ad and she said, the language you're using is actually rather masculine. And so we put it through this little test online where there's a website you can put your job ads through or your whatever you want to put through. And it tells you, how masculine is your ad, how feminine, what are the words, etc. And it was a very, very eye-opening experience because it was a kind of a subliminal thing. So we reworked that ad. We've got some consultants who work with us. And effectively what happened is we got a large kind of spike in the number of ladies who applied as well. And I think these are the kind of things we learn as we go along. But I thought I'd share that.
That's really amazing, Arzish. What website was it?
I can't remember.
Do you remember?
Was it Textio?
Probably, yeah. Probably right.
Interesting.
Yeah, we did it actually recent for all our jobs to see if they're like more feminine or more masculine, and they kind of ended up scoring 90% or above, so we had like a really good score. But it's about like choosing your words, literally. So if you use words like nurture a team rather than lead, you get like more female applicants. So you can balance this because it's also about I think Google made this study and they've changed the job descriptions accordingly. It's about not having too many bullet points as required skills, because we women, we tend to exclude ourselves from the application process at the very beginning if we think we don't match most of the bullet points listed there. So especially like for tech roles where hiring managers tend to, add in every technology that they would like that person to know, but it's actually a nice to have rather than a must, because they can, some of them can be learned on the job, especially like working with cloud or with a specific system or tool. So we kind of started doing that, and we started like reducing the amount of things we have as required skills and actually introducing them at things that you can learn here at Paddle.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. I'm learning a lot today. I hope the audience is feeling the same. Talking about the audience, I have a question that I think from the audience that I think is actually really, really helpful and fits in very nicely, because we talked about diversity, inclusion, belonging. We talked about culture. One of the things we didn't talk about was focus, mission, vision, purpose, right? So a lot of the times, like, the founders are the ones themselves who came up with their own mission, their own vision for the future, the next 3 to 5 years, most of the time, right, in their C-suite. So as people in talent and as, a co-founder or even as a head of a business unit, right? How do you maintain the focus on the mission, vision, and the direction moving forward within a scale-up when a lot of the mindsets, the mindset of the founders are still focused on what they did in order to survive or to succeed as a small business? How can you help them make that transition to expand their horizons from a people perspective?
For us, Nina, this was a very big topic. I think startups at the beginning, they kind of know what they'll do by the end of the day. And as you grow, that needs to become the end of the week and then the end of the month and then eventually the end of the quarter. And so building a drumbeat and building a cadence into the organization was one of the first things I realized when I came in I had to do. And so we've done that through working with a quarterly cadence of setting team objectives and also giving people like individual focus on what they need to do and combining that with measuring team effectiveness and also measuring engagement. And so it's not old school sort of performance management. It's really like a combination of measuring sentiment of teams that are growing very quickly, but also just making sure that everyone reflects every 3 months what they need to focus on and avoiding a little bit that flavor of the week and flavor of the month. Also for founders, right? Just forcing founders to think about what it is they're going to focus on for the next 3 months or the next 12 months. The other thing we have is just from a revenue point of view, we are on this mission of we want to be $100 million company in 2020, and that actually provides a lot of guidance, trickling down, like this is what it means in terms of people and what it means in terms of marketing, and that gives us a bit that longer term perspective as well. But actually creating a drumbeat and a fast scale up, I think is very important.
Yes, so that's a very interesting point, Peter. I guess for us, because we are not there at the moment. I guess for us is to kind of make sure that people that we talk to when we interview and go through our selection process and eventually join the company understand, I guess, I would say the vision behind the words. For us, it's like, our vision is to become the platform that all software companies use to run and grow their business, which is fair enough. It's a vision. It's a vision statement. It says a lot. However, it's when you talk to a candidate to explain, look, you're a small business. You've just started. You have a great product. You want to sell it online, but you have to build a payments team that, you need to have a team that builds your checkout, that integrates with payment methods. Maybe you want to run some analytics. Maybe you want a subscription model in place. And all of this is it takes you away from your focus, because your focus is not building a checkout, right? Your focus is, I have this great software program. I want to sell it online and I want to, that helps people. And I also want to start making some money from it because I've invested in it. So I guess it's about making them understand that we are actually making a change. We have a department that is really good at, talking to our software sellers, explaining them how they can use Paddle more efficiently. And you can see this in the day-to-day, through all departments, from product to engineering to customer support. Everyone is like, okay, let's help the little guy. So I guess it's about making them understand this so they can, because right now it's about also doing a little bit of good within the world. So I guess this is really helpful. And you get those people that are really passionate and really want to help businesses succeed. And they tell you, oh, I've actually built a piece of software some time ago. And when I was trying to sell it online, I found Paddle. It was recommended by other people. And they said, it's really good and you've helped me out. It's very interesting and it's always fulfilling. And I think a company's mission should be around, also getting that sense of fulfillment that you're doing something other than making money and keeping a lot of people employed and, using the best practices that you can to, build the products that you do.
Thank you. All right. That's very helpful. Thank you, guys. We're probably running towards the end of time. I just have one last question. Now, what advice would you give to a fellow colleague in the talent industry who's currently scaling up their organization?
In one sentence.
In one sentence. Everybody, you have a turn. Anybody wants to go first?
Sure, I can go first. I think the real challenge is being able to implement the initiatives and processes that we as HR professionals all know are necessary to succeed, but doing so in a way that doesn't break that startup culture and make things too corporate, and then you become sort of a department that's seen as a blocker instead of an enabler. I think that's something that's important to keep at the front of your mind.
No, I guess for me it would be, make sure you build great relationships with the hiring managers, as trust is really important, especially as you're scaling, and decisions need to be made fast, and be prepared to assume responsibility for these decisions, and also have fun, because you'll be able to literally see the company grow.
I'll chime in. From my perspective, I think what I would say is make sure you have built robust processes to guide this scaling, because you want to take the subjectivity out of hiring, and you want to really build a team and trust your processes that you've all signed off on together.
And for me, the question you constantly have to ask yourself when you hire in a scale-up is, what is the right level of experience that you need to bring in? Because the person you need today is probably not what you need in 12 or 18 months. And you have that, that permanent, I think, paradox of, hiring, too senior or too junior, or too early or too late. And I think getting a good sense of what it is you need, and also accepting that you only have a relatively short span of time that you can actually run with people if you scale very quickly. But determining that right level, I see a lot of organizations making mistakes in, either shooting too high or shooting too low. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. So all in all, if I can kind of summarize this advice, it would be, in a way, draw the organization roadmap to get to the vision, build the robust processes, and understand that for every hire, it is to basically to figure out what problem does this person solve, right, in the short, medium to long run. For HR and for talent, build great relationships and be an enabler to help make the process a much smoother one from the now to the future. Is that right?
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, very good. Now, Randy, over to you.
Thanks, everybody. We want a special thanks to our audience at Facebook Live. You can catch us every Monday. And thank you to our panelists and Nina for moderating today. We invite you to visit our website, scaleupacademy.io. You can find out more about us and what we do. And if you find these shows valuable, and we hope that you do, that you'll hit that like button and share today's show. I'm your host, Randy Cantrell, and I hope that you'll join us next week. We'll continue our discussion. We'll be talking about scaling up just in a broader view from the C-suite next Monday, July the 9th. Until then, everybody have a great week.
Thanks, Randy. Thanks, Nina.
Bye.
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 Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.